Hello, everybody. Welcome to Relax with Animal Facts. I am Steph Wolf, and I am here to learn some facts with you about our furry, scaly, or slimy friends, all while relaxing and sometimes going a little bit off topic. So, before we get into the show today, we're going to be just going over a few things. The first thing being exactly what the show is. So, for any of you new listeners out there, welcome. This is a podcast where I delve into a new animal via kind of internet facts. I see what's going on there around the world, and we establish, me and you, the listener, a sort of symbiotic relationship, a relationship we've talked about a few times on this podcast, and we'll talk about it again today with the rhinoceros, a really cool animal, a really odd animal if you think about it. But anyways, so that's how it happens. I go online, I find some facts, and I learn here with you, and you get to listen and kind of adventure with me in that sense, which is awesome. So in essence, all of you from all around the world are listening to a human being talk about animals from all over the world. So that's an interesting sort of way to think about it, the power of podcasting. So as I'm starting the show here, I'm just going to give a quick shout out to the United States, UK, Northern Ireland, and Canada. You guys have been giving such an amount of support. It's amazing. Thank you all so much for listening, and all of you other guys all around the world listening. I very much appreciate your support. So let's talk about how you can listen to the show. So you can listen to the show a number of ways, and I think it's awesome. That's what podcasting has allowed us to do. You could be out getting a coffee. You could be driving, maybe in traffic, and you just want something to pass the time. Well, that's what this podcast is all about, allowing you to relax a little bit, maybe even in a tense situation like you're in traffic, right? Who likes being in traffic? So you can just kind of occupy your mind with something else. Or you're at home and you have the option of having a comfy couch, or laying on a comfy couch, sitting somewhere on a nice chair, and maybe this is just the end of the day for you, and you're just sort of winding down. In any way, in all aspects of listening to this podcast is entirely encouraged, and I welcome you all on this wonderful journey that I go on with you, usually about 2 to 3 times a week. It's always a nice time for me, and I hope it is for you as well. So let's talk about the sources really quickly. I got my sources this time from Discover Wildlife. That I've been doing Discover since the start of the show, National Geographic, and Live Science. So the livescience.com and nationalgeographic.com. So that's where I got facts about our wonderful rhinoceros friends here. So let's get into the show. There are 5 extant species of rhino. So let's just review what extant means. It's just the opposite of extinct. The first time I read that, I forgot which podcast it was. That was the first time I was exposed to that word. But there are 5 extant species of rhino. We have the white and black rhino that are found in Africa, the Indian, Java, and Sumatran rhino, which are found in southern Asia. So we have a total of 5 species of rhino that are currently, walking the earth, and there are a few subspecies. I think it's in the double digits. I'm not exactly sure. It might have been 12, or 17, something like that. I don't exactly remember, but there were 5 species that are alive right now, main species. And the white and the black rhinos live in grasslands and floodplains, while the greater one-horned rhinos, they are found in swamps and rainforests. And that is why these guys are really, why I classified them as diverse habitats. And I just want to kind of go over the episode structure on this show. So if you were to look at the seasons and the episodes, it looks really mixed up. But I do this in a way where it's broken up into the forest habitat, into whatnot. The reason I chose the way I chose things is because water is a general sort of term, and same with forests and whatnot. I didn't go any more specific than just water, because then we'll be having like 12 seasons of the show. So just to explain a little bit, so I have some that are underwater. I didn't want to write aquatic because there are a lot of animals that are sort of both, and it's a kind of a weird sort of distinction I would have to make. So I decided to make everyone's lives a little easier. And in the case of rhino, when you have certain species that are in swamps and rainforests and others that are in grasslands and floodplain, that's when I start to classify things as having diverse habitats, enough so that I have to make that distinction for you guys, just so you understand a little bit about the episode and season structure. I'm just going to pour myself a quick tea here. If any of you guys are out there and are not laying in bed, you're completely welcome. Or maybe you are laying in bed, you have a tea beside you on your nightstand, you could always take a drink. It's important to hydrate, right? So yeah, we have those white and black rhinos, grasslands, floodplain. We have the greater one-horned rhinos, swamps and rainforests, and we have the Sumatran and Javan rhinos that are found in the swamps and rainforests in Malaysia and in Indonesia. So both the black and white rhinoceroses are actually gray. One quick side note: rhinoceroses, there has to be a better. I would imagine it's something like or it should be rhinoceri or something else, because rhinoceroses, wow, that must be tough to say 10 times fast. So they are actually gray, although they have that black and white in their name. They are both in this sort of middle ground. And the way that they differ is not actually in color, it's rather in lip shape. This was an interesting fact reading about this. So the black rhino has a pointed upper lip, while the white has a squared lip. And this is sort of the best way you can describe it without looking at a picture. Looking at a picture would definitely help you see just a little bit more into what they were referring to. Because when I just read it, I was trying to imagine having a pointed upper lip, having just a square upper lip. What do those even look like? So this is the contributing factor to their different diets. Although they're both herbivores, they have different sort of eating habits. And one is that black rhinos are browsers. So they eat trees and bushes, like things off of trees and bushes. They use their lips to sort of pluck leaves and fruits from the branches. So the ability to sort of pluck, right? Because we have this pointed upper lip that allows them to do this sort of thing. But white rhinos will generally tend to do more of the grazing on grasses, and they will walk with their enormous heads, with their squared lips lowered to the ground to be able to graze. So even this very small distinction of having a pointed upper lip as opposed to a square one changes their diets and their eating habits. So this is how delicate nature and whatnot is. This sort of balance that they strike just by having a different lip shape, and it's amazing to me. So rhinos are herbivores, from what we just covered. I'm very happy that rhinos are not carnivores. Otherwise, we would have a big problem. It would be a very, very rough time here on Earth. So while rhinos are solitary, or black rhinos are mostly solitary, a group of rhinos is called a crash. And that sounds like an apt term. It sounds like something that would be used to describe a group of rhinos. Crash, I'm not sure what else I was thinking of, but crash has this sort of sound of it, just by pronouncing it in the English language, has this sort of harsh and as if it's something large or of meaning. And in the case of rhinos, these guys they definitely measure up. We're going to get into how big they are right now. So the largest species of the bunch there is the white rhino, according to the San Diego Zoo. The San Diego Zoo also has a lot of different publications that are really noteworthy and interesting. So you guys ever want to read something, the San Diego Zoo are always putting out sort of statistics to do with different animals. It's super interesting. So the white rhino grows up to be around 12 to 13 feet long. So that is ginormous. I haven't used that word on the podcast, I don't think, yet. So it's 12 to 13 feet long, and it's up to 6 feet, starting from the bottom, the hoof, up to the shoulder. So generally these things generally animals are not sized up from the foot or the bottom of the foot up to the head, because in the case of elephants, especially African elephants, these guys had huge cranial size and cranial capacities, you'll generally see them measure from hoof up to shoulder because the head just doesn't really usually count in. But if it did, I'm sure that they would be kind of on the up and up. 12 to 13 feet long and 6 feet up. That's a pretty formidable opponent to me. Rhinos weigh around 2,300 kilograms. So we're talking 5,000 pounds. So 5,000 pounds, nothing to be obviously, laughing about. These guys are very, very large animals. But we can relate them. This is why I love the podcast. We can relate them to actual elephants. If you haven't listened to the elephant podcast, feel free to listen to that another time or right after this one. Really interesting one where you can go on a gentle giants sort of listening spree. So with the elephants, they, I think, even almost tripled or rather, I would say doubled 2.5 of the rhino's weight. So that is also due to height. I mean, elephants are a lot larger than rhinos. I didn't know they were that much larger. So we're talking 5,000 pounds to the African elephants close to 13.5. I think that was 13,500 pounds. So over double. And I didn't know that. I thought that rhinos and elephants were much closer in terms of weight, even though I knew rhinos were shorter. Rhinos just had this sort of, from the outside, they have this sort of density to them. It looks like they have such a muscular and whether it's muscular tissue or subcutaneous tissue, subcutaneous just meaning fat, for any of you anatomists out there, they just looked super dense to me, and I thought that they would weigh up a little bit closer than 5,000 pounds. But regardless, with no relative talking point, without taking in the elephant, these guys are very, very big. And let's go with the other side. So the smallest rhino species is the Sumatran rhino, or Sumatran, however you'd like to say that. It grows from 8 to 10 feet, which is around 2.5 to 3 meters long. So we already see that distinction. So we're going down about 4 feet on average, and up to 4.8 feet or 1.5 meters from hoof to shoulder. So significant difference there between the Sumatran and the white rhino. And in this case, they actually break less than 1,000 kilograms in this case. They're around 800 kilograms, which will weigh up to be just around 1,765 pounds there. So fairly large difference. We're talking around a 3,000 or maybe even more of a difference between these guys, and that's just how nature is. And it's really interesting to have, although they're part of the same family, and that they have different species that are so different in terms of anatomical structure, of being, one is so much larger than the other one, and that it's just, it's awesome to think about. One thing that they don't actually credit rhinos for very much is having a sharp sense of hearing and a good sense of smell, but they do actually have a keen sense of smell, and it's very important in their I would say day to day. Yeah, so they might find another rhino, whether it be mating season or not. They can follow the trail of the scent that is left behind each rhino on different animal leaves, and they will leave it behind on their landscape where whenever they go, because it's kind of hard for these guys not to leave a lot of tracks in their way, because as we covered, they're very large. And let's talk about taxonomy for a second. So rhinos are a part of the group called, you guys are gonna have to bear with me on these names. That these names are always killer. So rhinos are part of a group called Perissodactyla. That sounded pretty smooth to me, which are odd-toed ungulates. So if you've ever seen a rhino's feet before, you'll see that they have those 3 toes, those signature 3 toes, and I think that is why they're called odd toes. I've never heard of this term before, odd-toed ungulates. It's a really interesting name, very odd name, but I guess it fits the description for the rhino because they do have 3 toes. From what I remember from memory, I'll have to search up a picture a little later. So there are only 3 animal families that are still alive, that are part of this group, and that are the Rhinoceros Tidae, which include rhinos, the Equidae, which have horses, zebras, donkeys. They refer to them as asses, that's their actual name, and Tapiridae, which are tapirs. If you don't know what a tapir is, they are just sort of interesting creatures that live in different jungle and forest regions of South America, like parts of Asia, Central America. So tapirs are really very, very unique animals, and I think they're a very good candidate for a future episode. But that's just where we're going to stop with them for now. So they are part of the Tapiridae family. So we have 3 different animal families that are still alive that are part of this main group of Perissodactyla, okay, which rhinos fit into as well, as we talked about. So black rhinos specifically are mostly solitary. Of course, this they make an exception to the rule when it comes to raising children and having a female rhino around in the case of having offspring. But generally, these guys are mostly solitary. And we've covered a lot of solitary guys on the podcast here. So while many different animals really rely on being in large groups or even small groups, but generally larger groups will help a lot for if they're, for example, more vulnerable. So in the case of, you'll see maybe antelope or different sorts of grazing herbivores that are more prone to danger from predatory reasons. Being in groups really helps to increase survivability of the individual. Or in the case of, maybe let's take the other stance of predation, when we see groups of wolves, right? There's a reason that wolves have a pack. Hunting in a pack will really save each one of them trouble, because being on their own, they're a lot less effective than if they were to be in a group. And in the case of rhinos, or black rhinos specifically, they prefer to be mostly solitary. What these guys, in terms of predators, I know that probably different big cats or whatnot would maybe give these guys a go, but generally their main predators are humans in terms of poachers, which is always a problem. And I'm sure, actually we'll cover that just a little bit later. I think I have a fact or two about it. So let's talk about offspring for a second. So female rhinos reproduce once every about 2.5 years. 2.5 to 5 years. So that's the average time. And the calf, okay, so let's take a note of the name for a infant of this animal. It's a calf, and it's dependent on their parents until about 3 years old. So 3 years old, that's a good amount of time. I think the average for many of these big animals is around 2 to 3, and the gestation period for rhinos lasts about 15 and 16 months, and giving birth to just one calf. So 15 to 16 months is a very long gestation period in comparison to a lot of animals that we've covered already. Including humans in that case, still not rounding up to be the elephant, which has the largest gestation period of any land mammal, at least that is known. So, which is 22 months. Again, awesome episode. Go listen to it. So they usually give birth to just one calf at a time within a 2.5 to 5 year period. So every 2.5 to 5 years. And their teeth. So they have around 24 to 34 teeth, of course, depending on the species. Different teeth will be better, or more teeth will be better for certain things. I imagine more teeth would be better for the rhinos that are primarily grazing, as opposed to the ones that are browsers, which prefer to have berries and things like that from trees, and be able to pick the different branches because of those different shaped lips that they have. So it didn't say exactly which one's which, but generally I think the one that is grazing more would probably have more teeth to help really break down that plant matter in their teeth. So black rhinos feed at night during the gloaming hours of dawn and dusk. So under the hot African sun, they will take cover by lying in the shade. So I didn't know that they fed at night, but if these guys are awake, they are generally eating. There are exceptions, of course, like on the rare times that they don't eat, they will sleep. But rhinos are also what are referred to as wallowers. So just about, if you guys know pigs, pigs have a tendency, or it's more of an adaptability sort of thing, evolutionarily speaking. They like to roll about in the mud with their bodies, or just be relaxed in water and mud. So rhinos have this same sort of thing going on. So again, that's called wallowing. And they often find a suitable water hole and roll in its mud that'll coat their skin. We're talking adaptability here. They'll get a natural bug repellent, so from this mud, and a sunblock at the same time. So a double threat just from lying around in the mud and rolling around in it. So that sounds like a great life there. And they will also rub against tree trunks and rocks. If you've ever seen maybe how bears do this sort of thing, maybe they're just itchy. But in the case of rhinos, they do this to remove what are referred to as ectoparasites. And within that tree falls ticks. Okay, so you guys, I'm sure any of you who have dogs out there, or cats, or anything that really has fur, or really any animal. I mean, ticks don't really have too much of a preference there. How annoying ticks can really be. We talked about a symbiotic relationship earlier in the show at the beginning. If you've ever seen rhinos let birds sit on them, so they're seen to have this super peaceful relationship with birds, just like as if the birds are there and the rhino doesn't get anything from it. But that's not true. These birds that sit on them, they're referred to as oxpeckers. And they share this symbiotic relationship with rhinos. So because they have these ectoparasites that we just talked about, such as ticks, kind of all over their hide, they really will go anywhere. Birds will have access to a food source, so via the ticks, and rhinos have access to these birds, which act as sort of mini vacuums for them. So this is what we describe as a symbiotic relationship, when we have a benefit on both sides. While ticks and rhinos have a completely what is referred to as a parasitic relationship, where only one benefits on the detriment of the other. Oxpeckers and rhinos live kind of side by side in those ways. And not only that, but oxpeckers will let the rhino know if there is any danger. And this will act as an alarm for them. So they have even not only vacuums, but one that can also detect danger. So if they see danger, of course it's in the oxpeckers' best interest to let that rhino know, because they are, landing on a rhino and getting pretty much free food and free area there, free real estate. And that's just beautiful to me, how nature has these ways of bringing animals together that normally you wouldn't think would be in any proximity to one another. So rhinos do have home ranges. So we saw home ranges in the koala episode of a few episodes back. So rhinos have home ranges as well, and they're marked with dung heaps. So dung being a word for poo. And these are referred to as middens. And they're used to communicate sort of the whereabouts, and not only their whereabouts, but also their reproductive status. So animals can get so much from so little, and especially in terms of poop. It's a very easy thing to leave around in the case of rhinos, and it's an easy way to sort of communicate and to let other rhinos know kind of where they're at, what's going on. I'm going to go on a few facts here as we get closer to the end of the show. When rhinos are happy, they vocalize it as what is described as a mwonk sound. That is spelled M-W-O-N-K and pronounced exactly how you would think. If you've never heard it before, I'm sure you can find it on YouTube. Let me just take a quick drink of my tea here. I don't want it to get too cold. Okay, that's very good. Again, we have with vocalizations. So rhinos, you wouldn't think about too much for their vocalizations, but they do indeed vocalize when to them they see fit. So when they're happy, this is generally when you will hear this mwonk sound. Woolly rhinos. Okay, we know woolly mammoths. Those are the ones depicted in pop culture a lot, or not pop. Actually, I mean, a few movies and whatnot, but more well known for sure than woolly rhinos. But they died out around 10,000 years ago, and we know this because of dating. When I say dating, I don't mean what possibly dating could mean. I mean more of a different sort of so we have carbon dating. There's a lot of different dating methods that are used for fossils and whatnot to figure out the dates of them. How they work is also incredibly interesting, and there's a lot of podcasts I think that talk about it, scientifically speaking. But anyways, woolly rhinos were depicted in paintings on cave walls in France and dated to be around 30,000 years old. Not the rhinos, but the paintings on the cave walls. So 30,000 years old. I just think that it's so amazing that we can find kind of what our ancestors were doing 30,000 years ago. We can find different sort of things like cave paintings and different sorts of tools that they used to work with. To me, history and archaeological findings are some of the most interesting things that we can really look at, because it's just, it's marvelous to think about. Let's talk about the poachers. So poachers, they really value horns. So the horns of these rhinos. So this is a more well-known thing when it comes to the poaching of rhinos. They are used to craft sort of ornamental daggers from these horns. Not only that, but rhino horn is also found and used in many alternative medicines, I think mostly in Asia. I'm almost positive about that. But there is no real documented health benefits, guys, from rhino horn. It's sort of more of a pseudoscience and more of a traditional or maybe even a cultural thing. I'm not exactly sure. But there are no documented health benefits from rhino horn. And Save the Rhino is an organization that's really dedicated to stop poaching from happening, because it really is, at the end of the day, pointless to poach these guys for their horns for whatever reason. So really interesting facts here. These guys are so unique in the way that really, when you think about it, what other animal really looks like a rhino? What has this huge horn, on top of their on the middle of their face there, or their head? And we're not talking dinosaurs. We're talking animals that are alive right now, and we have a walking gentle giant here. These guys really don't like to mess around too much. They're not very aggressive. I assume they're aggressive with interpersonal conflicts, but generally not with humans, at least that I've seen. Let's go on to the last fact here, which is the word rhino. And rhino comes from two Greek words meaning rhino, which means nose, and ceros, meaning horn. And if you combine those two, you will see that you will create the word rhinoceros. I really would not have named them anything different, in my opinion. So we've reached the end of the show here today about the mighty rhinoceros, and I'd like to just say a few things about what you can do to really help the show. To help the show, the main thing that you can do is to share. Okay, so sharing with your friends when it comes to relaxing with animal facts. Maybe there's somebody that wants to learn about animals and loves animals, has an appreciation, and just wants to sort of take a step back in their day-to-day and focus on learning about some of them. So if you do that, I very much appreciate your support, and I love all you guys, and I'll see you on the next podcast episode with the next animal. Take care.